Satellite messages sound simple. You buy the tiny orange anxiety brick, you take it hiking, and if everything goes horribly wrong, you just press the SOS button and hopefully someone with a helicopter, a first aid kit, and more emotional stability than you comes to help. Simple, except it's not, because once you actually start looking into satellite messages, you very quickly end up in a swamp of subscriptions, activation fees, message limits, tracking intervals, coverage maps, phone pairing, weather forecasts. And this matters because you're buying this gear because one day you might actually need it. So in this video, I want to look specifically at satellite messengers for hiking, not PLBs versus satellite messengers, because I've already made a video on that and you can find the link below. This one is focused on satellite messengers themselves, the different types, how they actually work, what features matter, where they perform well, where they struggle, and what they cost. And most importantly, which type of satellite messengers make sense for the way that you like to hike. The first thing to understand is that a satellite messenger is not just a simple SOS button. That's part of it, obviously, but the real value is in its communication. A proper satellite messenger can let you send check-ins, share location, send messages, receive messages, track your route, and in an emergency situation, explain what has actually happened. And that last part is huge because there's a big difference between I need help and I've rolled my ankle, I'm stable, I have shelter, I'm with one other person, and I'm about 4 kilometers from the trailhead. That second message gives rescuers context. It tells them whether this is urgent or not. It tells them what sort of resources might actually be needed. And that is where satellite messengers are just so useful. They're not just about pressing a panic button, they're about reducing uncertainty when normal phone coverage disappears. For me, the most important way to judge any satellite messenger is what I'd call the phone dead test. Basically, if your phone dies, what still works? Because a lot of hikers now use their phone for everything. Maps, photos, videos, notes, weather, music, banking, emergency contacts. But the problem is your phone is also one of the most fragile parts of your entire hiking system. It can run out of battery, it can get wet, it can get smashed, it can overheat, and it can freeze. So if your satellite messenger relies heavily on your phone, that's not automatically bad, but you need to understand that trade-off. Some devices are mostly standalone. They can send messages, trigger SOS, track and perform useful functions directly from the device itself. Some devices are phone paired first. The device acts more like a satellite modem, while the phone app is where most of the actual messaging happens. And some devices, like modern iPhones with satellite features, are obviously entirely dependent on the phone. So when you're comparing these things, don't just ask what has the best application or phone app, ask what still works when my phone is dead in a creek. So there's basically 3 main categories of satellite messengers, and the first category is standalone satellite messages. This is where devices like Garmin InReach Mini, GPS Map, and SpotX will sit. These are devices that can do meaningful things without your phone. The Garmin InReach Mini style devices are compact, lightweight, and designed specifically for off-grid communication. You can pair them with your phone, which makes them a lot easier to use, but the device itself has its own screen and controls. Then you've got bigger Garmin GPS Map style devices, which are more like full GPS navigation units with InReach communication built in. And then there's SpotX, which is interesting because it has a physical keyboard and is designed for standalone two-way messaging. The second category is phone paired first satellite messages, which is where something like Zolio will fit in. The idea here is that the device connects to your phone and your phone becomes the main interface. So your messages are typed through an app, which is much easier than trying to type on a tiny device screen with buttons designed by someone who clearly hates thumbs. But the trade-off is that the richer messaging experience depends on your phone. Zolio, for example, still has basic check-in and SOS functions directly from the device, which is important, but for proper two-way conversational messaging, the app is the main experience. And the third category is satellite-enabled phones. The obvious example here is iPhone satellite features. And honestly, this is one of the things that has made the whole topic more confusing, because now people are asking, if my phone can contact my friends, family, and emergency services by satellite, do I still need a dedicated satellite messenger? And the answer is maybe. It depends on where you hike, how remote your trips are, whether you need regular messaging, whether you need tracking, whether you hike solo, and whether you trust your phone battery. Now, this is the nerdy bit, but it does matter. Different satellite messengers use different satellite networks. Garmin inReach devices, Zolio, Somewhere, and some other products use the Iridium network. Spot devices use the Globalstar network. Apple's satellite features use Globalstar and partner networks depending on the feature and region. And this all matters because coverage is not identical. Iridium is generally the stronger option for truly global coverage. That's one reason why Garmin inReach has become so popular with hikers, remote workers, sailors, expedition users, and people who seem to enjoy being unreachable in deeply inconvenient places. Globalstar can still be very useful, and Spot absolutely has a place, but its coverage is more regional. That doesn't mean it won't work where you hike, but it does mean you need to check the coverage map rather than just assuming it will magically work everywhere. Because it might not. Satellite messages are impressive, but they are not wizardry. They still need sky view, they still can struggle under heavy tree cover, and they can struggle in deep valleys, gorges, canyons, steep terrain, and places where the horizon is blocked. Let's start with Garmin, because for most hikers, Garmin is probably the default option people will often think of. And to be fair, there's a reason for that. Garmin has a pretty broad inReach ecosystem. You've got compact devices like the inReach Mini series, and then you've got inReach Messenger and Messenger Plus. You've also got the larger GPS map devices that combine mapping and satellite messaging. And then you've got Garmin's app ecosystem as well, where you can pair the device with your phone to make messaging a lot easier. From my own experience, using the Garmin inReach Mini paired with my iPhone is probably one of the bigger benefits that just gives you a really good balance of standalone backup and phone-based usability. Typing directly on a tiny inReach is not exactly a rich and fulfilling human experience, but it does work. It's not fun. Using the phone app just makes it so much easier. The important thing is that the inReach device itself still has its own functionality. So if my phone did die, I wouldn't be completely helpless. And that's the point. Garmin's biggest strength is that it gives you options. If you want compact and light, you look at the mini style devices. If you want more battery and a more app focused experience, then the inReach Messenger device can make sense as well. If you want full navigation and mapping in the same device, then obviously look at the GPS map models. The downside here is cost and complexity. Garmin devices are not cheap and the subscriptions are not nothing. The ecosystem can feel a bit confusing as well at times because there are different devices, different apps, different plan tiers, and lots of little details that matter depending on how often you hike. But for serious hikers, especially remote or solo hikers, Garmin is probably still the most complete all-round system. Not necessarily the cheapest or the simplest, but probably the strongest general recommendation if you want a satellite messenger that can properly function as part of a backcountry safety system. Zolio is probably the easiest one to explain. It's a phone-paired satellite communicator designed to make off-grid messaging simple. You pair it with your phone, use the app, and you can send and receive messages when you're outside mobile network coverage. It uses the Iridium network, which is a strong point. It also has device-level SOS and check-in buttons, which means if your phone does die, you can still send an SOS or a basic check-in directly from the device. That is very important because if it was completely useless without your phone, I'd be a lot more cautious. The strength of Zolio is simplicity. For someone who mainly wants to send messages like, I'm okay, I'm at camp, or I'm running late, Zolio makes a lot of sense. It's not trying to be a full GPS mapping unit. It's not trying to replace your navigation system. It's basically saying your phone is already a great interface, so let's make it work when there's no reception. The downside is that if you want proper standalone messaging without your phone, Zolio is not as strong as something like a Garmin inReach Mini or Spot X. So I'd think of Zolio as a really good option for hikers who are happy using their phones as the main interface, but still want a dedicated satellite device for messaging, check-ins, and SOS. It's probably one of the most appealing options for people who value simplicity over having a tiny backcountry computer clipped to their shoulder strap. Spot is interesting because it has been around for a long time, but I think you need to separate the different Spot devices. Spot X is the one that fits this video properly because it's a two-way satellite messenger. It has a physical keyboard, it can send and receive messages, and it can send SOS. It also works as a standalone device without needing your phone for every interaction. In some ways, the physical keyboard is a bit old school, but there's also something nice about having actual buttons when you're cold, tired, wet, and losing the will to interact with touchscreens. The downside here is the network. Spot uses Globalstar, and based on the coverage information, it's more regional than Iridium. That doesn't mean it's bad, it just means you need to check whether it suits where you actually hike. For a hiker in Australia, New Zealand, North America, Europe, and covered regions, it may be perfectly usable. But if I were choosing one system for remote hiking and broad coverage, especially especially internationally, I would be leaning towards Iridium-based devices first. Then there's Spot Gen 4, and this is where I'd be a bit more careful. Spot Gen 4 is useful, but I wouldn't really call it a full modern satellite messenger in the same way I'd talk about Garmin InReach, Zolio, or Spot X. It's more of a one-way tracker and SOS device. It can send preset style messages and location updates, but it's not a proper two-way messaging device in the same sense. So for this video, I'd mention Spot Gen 4 for context, but I wouldn't spend too long on it because the focus here is satellite messages, and two-way communication is one of the main reasons people buy this category in the first place. Now, let's talk about the phone-shaped elephant in the room. Modern iPhones can do some satellite communication depending on model, region, and feature availability, and that is useful. I don't want to dismiss that. If you already have a compatible iPhone, having emergency SOS via satellite is a great backup. In Australia, emergency SOS via satellite is available, and that's a pretty big deal. But here's the key point. An iPhone with satellite features is not the same thing as a dedicated hiking satellite messenger, at least not yet and not everywhere. Feature availability depends on your country. Messaging features are not equally available in every region just yet. Battery life is your phone battery, and durability is still your phone durability. Your phone is already doing a lot on trail. It's your camera, it's your navigation, it's your video recorder. So while iPhone satellite features are excellent as a backup, I personally wouldn't treat them as a full replacement for a dedicated satellite messenger on remote multi-day hikes, especially if you want regular check-ins, tracking, weather, or a separate device that still works if your phone dies. For short hikes, day hikes, or lower risk trips, a compatible iPhone might be enough for some people, but for serious remote hiking, I'd still prefer a dedicated satellite messenger at the moment. So what features should you actually care about? Well, as we mentioned, first is two-way messaging. This is the big one. Can you send and receive messages? Can you explain what's happening? Can someone ask you a follow-up question? Can emergency services or response coordinators get more detail? That is the whole point of these satellite messages. The second point is standalone usability. Again, what can it do without your phone? Can it send an SOS? Can it send a check-in? Can it send a custom message? Can it show your location? Can you actually use it when you're cold, wet, stressed, and your hands have turned into pale little sausages? Third is network and coverage. Don't just buy based on brand. Look at the network, look at where you hike, and look at whether the device is suitable for your country, your trails, your terrain, and the type of trips you plan to do. Fourth is tracking, and tracking can be useful, especially if you hike solo or do long distance routes. It lets people follow your progress and can create a breadcrumb trail, but it can also drain battery fast and increases your plan cost. So tracking is useful, but think about whether you actually need it constantly on. The fifth point is weather. Some satellite messengers offer weather forecasts, and that can be very useful in remote areas, especially on multi-day hikes. But satellite weather is not a permission slip to just simply ignore obvious conditions. If the sky is black and the wind is howling, don't walk into it just because your little orange brick suggested there might be light showers. And sixth is the battery life. Battery claims vary a lot depending on tracking intervals, sky view, tree cover, temperature, and how often you use the device. A device might claim excellent battery life in open sky, but real-world hiking is not always open sky. Sometimes it's tree cover, steep terrain, or rain. So battery life matters, but so does how you use it. Now let's talk about the part that everyone hates, the cost. With satellite messengers, the device price is only the beginning. You've got the upfront purchase price, then you've got activation fees, and then you've got monthly subscriptions as well. Then message limits, tracking costs, weather forecast costs, suspension rules, cancellation rules, and potentially plan upgrades if you realize the cheap plan doesn't actually suit how you use the device. This is why I think people should compare satellite messengers over 3 to 5 years, not just based on the upfront sticker price. For regular hikers, the subscription is basically part of the product. So don't just ask, can I afford the device? Ask, can I afford to keep this active? For people who hike year-round, a monthly plan might make sense. For seasonal hikers, the ability to suspend or pause service becomes much more important. And for people who only do 1 or 2 remote trips per year, you need to do the maths properly. So where does this leave us? Well, for most serious hikers, especially solo hikers or remote multi-day hikers, I think Garmin InReach style devices are still the safest general recommendation. They're not perfect, they're not cheap, but the combination of Iridium coverage, two-way messaging, SOS tracking, weather, and standalone functionality just makes them very hard to beat. Zolio is very compelling, especially if you're happy using your phone as the main interface. It's simple, it uses Iridium, and it has device level SOS and check-in, and it's probably easier for a lot of people to understand standalone than the full Garmin ecosystem. The trade-off is that it's less capable as a standalone messenger if your phone does die and you want more than basic functions. For hikers who want standalone two-way messaging with a keyboard and are happy with the coverage trade-offs, then Spot X is worth considering. I wouldn't dismiss it, but I would be more careful about checking coverage for your exact hiking regions. For people relying on iPhone satellite features, I'd say this. It's a great backup. It's much better than nothing, and for some lower risk hikers, it might be enough. But for remote multi-day hiking, solo trips, international trips, or situations where you want regular off-grid communication, I still think a dedicated satellite messenger makes more sense, at least at the moment. So should you buy a satellite messenger? Well, if you hike remotely, hike solo, do multi-day trips, regularly lose phone reception, or have people at home who want to know you're alive, then yes, I think a satellite messenger is one of the most useful safety devices that you can carry. Don't buy the device with the longest spec sheet. Buy the one that matches how you actually hike. The one you can afford to keep active, the one you know how to use, the one that still works when your phone dies, and the one that gives you the best chance of communicating clearly when things go wrong. Because in the backcountry, gear you understand is usually much more valuable than gear that simply looks impressive on a product page. And yes, a satellite messenger is expensive, but so is a rescue, so is being missing, and so is explaining to your partner that your entire emergency communication plan was based on an iPhone with 7% battery. So choose carefully, test it before you need it, and try not to press the SOS unless the situation has moved from uncomfortable adventure to please send adults with helicopters. PLBs, on the other hand, are a different story, and if you want to know the difference between a PLB and a satellite messenger, then go watch this video next where I break it all down. I'll see you there.